there's another written communication from Matt McCool, and this I'm only raising because I have a question for the city manager and the city attorney. I see that written communications have redactions in it, and I've never seen written communication with redactions before. And I was curious why that is. Why are we redacting? I'm assuming this is somebody's name. Why are we redacting a name of somebody in a written communication that's provided from a member of the public?
Thank you, Councilman.
I'm generally, big on transparency, and people are to be able to voice their concerns. As I mentioned, Bob Atkins, as much as I hate him calling me names, but he has the right to call me all kinds of names that he wants. And I'm okay with him obviously providing these written communications. But for this other written communication, for some reason, I'm assuming somebody's name was redacted, and I was curious why that is. And what authority do we have to redact somebody, redact information from written communications?
Absolutely. I'd like to share that that redaction was made because it references staff names, and I am not comfortable airing personnel complaints in a public agenda. I think as public servants, that's an obligation I have. And so I asked for those to be redacted.
All right, I guess that moves me on to our city attorney, because I understand that I don't want anybody to complain about me either if I could help it and have people redact my name from a complaint. But I'm a public servant as well. Somebody wants to complain about me and send a written communication calling me names. And frankly, in the 7 years, it happens almost every month. Somebody decides a written communication to call one of us in the council names, or the city manager or the city attorney. I don't know who that person is, but to the extent that it's a city employee, do we have any legal justification to redact somebody's name if we have a member of the public that's complaining about them? I'm not aware of one. So Mike, if there is a legal justification, please let me know what it is, because that's the first I've seen it.
Mayor, Council, in this particular instance, Mr. McCool has recently filed a specific personnel complaint against this individual. We are handling that personnel complaint, as we do all personnel complaints of our employees, as a confidential matter. The employee is an employee of our police department, and there are very specific rules and state laws governing how we pursue complaints raised by members of the public against members of the police department. And we determined that in light of the context of the complaint, that this letter to you came on the heels of a letter that came a week or two ago making this personnel complaint, which we elected not to place on the council agenda because it was a personnel complaint, that it would be consistent with that to retain the confidentiality of the identity of the employee while that investigation was taking place. So I would say that it is an unusual situation. It's not typical. There are seldom occasions when a complaint about a member of the city staff or the city council, for that matter, never actually with the city council, I think, but there are seldom occasions where a complaint about a staff member would be kept confidential, particularly one that pertains to performance as opposed to an ad hominem attack. But in this particular instance, after some consideration, we determined that it was an unusual circumstance because of the way this complaint against the city prosecutor's office came on the heels of a specific personnel complaint against a police officer who was mentioned in the correspondence that's attached to your agenda tonight. So I hope that that answers your question. I would just conclude by saying that it is, you are correct in noting that this is an unusual situation. It's not typical for us to redact a communication from the public, and it's not typical to redact a complaint about an employee generally.
Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate that, the unusual circumstance, but because this is public comment, if Mike McCool was here and he called in and read that letter or whatever it is, and he mentioned the person's name, I mean, what option do we have about telling him he can't mention the person's name? We're going to escort him out, or basically turn out the computer down because he's mentioning somebody's name. It's just really weird to me that we have a written communication during public participation where somebody can come in and say whatever they want, but because they decided to give it to us in writing, we elect to redact somebody's name from it. It just seems a little unusual.
Did you want me to respond further?
Well, I meant that, those are questions. Like if somebody comes in and basically provides public participation verbally, what control do we have to tell him he cannot mention somebody's name?
We have very little control about what people say in a public meeting, but we do have more control over what goes on our agendas and then goes out onto the internet and is essentially available forever to the entire world. And to the extent that we have some measure of control, we elected to exercise it. To the extent that we can control post our meetings, what people say in our meetings, that's an option as well, although I don't know that we've ever considered it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.